Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Healthy Eating Experience. Now I'm joined with Carson right here, and my name is Chuck.
Welcome back to QIU Virtual Public Health Campaign and thank you for joining us. Our culinary adventure continues today with yet another episode of Healthy Eating. This time, my colleague Chan is going to show you how to make oven baked meatballs, a wonderfully balanced savory dishes that you can enjoy with a simple salad. Let's check it out.
My apologies, ladies and gentlemen. There apparently is quite some technical issues right here. Our live session will restart in 5 minutes. See you in 5 minutes.
Don't watch it if you do. Don't watch it if you do. Don't watch it if you do. Don't watch it if you do.
Thank you so much, Carson. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. And hopefully this time the problem will be settled. And now, let us start the video.
Today, we will be making meatballs. Now first, you put away your knife. Then, you add the breadcrumbs. You sprinkle it into the milk and yogurt. mixture, sprinkle it in slowly. Or you can actually just dump the whole thing. It doesn't make much difference, to be honest. Now, after you have dumped all the breadcrumbs into this mixture, you will have to mix it and let it hydrate for 30 to 45 minutes. That way, you will have the best effect. The meatballs will be really juicy. But if you do not have the time, you can skip this step and just add these mixtures straight into the meatballs after you've seasoned it with spices. Add in your onions. Now these are not ordinary onions. These are onions that has went through the food processor and it's strained. As you can see, it is quite dry. You have to remove the juices so your meatballs won't be too soggy. You want it to be juicy, not soggy. Mix it and acknowledge the fact that a spoon would be a better tool to mix these instead of chopstick. At this point, you will be asking, how much onions or breadcrumbs or yogurt should I use? Now, the details of these ingredients will be listed in the description below. Continue mixing your mixture until no lumps are present. Add some water if you need to rehydrate the breadcrumbs. And this time, the spice mix. Sprinkle it in slowly. I'm kidding, you don't have to sprinkle it, just add it into your breadcrumbs. Make sure you're doing this in a clean bowl because you will have to taste your breadcrumbs before adding it into the meatballs. Now add the breadcrumbs to the meat of your choice, but before that, don't forget to taste your spice mix and your breadcrumbs, because that's the only time you can taste it. And apparently I did not add salt, that's why now I'm adding it. And as usual, the exact amount of ingredients, including salt, will be listed in the description below. And now it's time to add your mix into the meat. And from this point onward, don't taste anything until you have cooked it. Mix the meat with your hands, and of course, please wash your hands before you do it. Some people say don't overwork your meatballs. Now, don't worry about it. Just work it and make sure it forms a paste, and make sure the binders, the breadcrumbs, are thoroughly mixed with the meat. Now here is some footage of me mixing the meatballs to let you have a general idea on how to do it.
A few moments later.
And it is time to shape the meatballs. Now please do wet your hands before you do it. This will make the meatballs easier to handle and less sticky. Now you don't have to shape it perfectly rounded, because for my recipe this will flatten. Bake these meatballs in a preheated oven at 180 degrees Celsius for 17 minutes. Now it's time for the salad to go with these meatballs. You'll need basil, parsley, and white onions. The exact amount of ingredients will be in the description below, except for the parsley and basil. It really depends on how much vegetables you want, but in general the ratio is a 2-to-1 ratio of parsley to basil ratio. Now you can chop these up, or you can just crush it with your hands and add it into a bowl. But not the onions, obviously, you will have to cut the onions. Add everything to the bowl and squeeze in the juice of half a lemon. At this point, you're pretty much done with your salad. You can add in some salt and pepper. They're optional, but I will be adding them. Mix everything together and you're good to go. Now obviously I'm not a fine dining chef, but I still do have to make this look fancy. In a bowl, add in a meatball and the salad you just made. You can take your time with this, no rush. Make it look fancy. it's time for some low-sodium soy sauce. Just a splash of it will do. And there you have it. Meatballs with a simple sandwich.
Wow, if I didn't know better, I think that dish actually looks too delicious to be healthy.
Well, I don't like to compliment myself, but I'm going to agree with you on this. That's the thing. People think healthy food is unappetizing, and it's simply not true. Look at the meatballs.
I think you have certainly given us proof of that. So after you have made a devoured your oven baked meatballs, what's the bad things to do? Exercise, of course.
Yep, that's in 2 hours. But before that, we will start our live Q&A sessions again. And as usual, if you have any questions, please leave it in the comment section, and my partner here will relay the questions to me, and I will provide you with an answer. So let's start with the first question. Come on, just drop in your questions. Don't be shy.
But first, let me ask you some personal questions. Like just now I saw in the video, the oven is already preheat. May I know what is the temperature we need to?
Okay, preheat your oven at the temperature that you were to bake your meatballs in. So we baked the meatballs at 220 degrees Celsius. So preheat your oven to that temperature, 220 degrees Celsius. There's no fixed temperature on which temperature that you should preheat your oven. It really depends on what dish you are cooking.
Yeah, get it.
So yeah, I see your comment there.
Yeah, this is the first question. How does this recipe help in controlling hypertension?
Well, this recipe is really rich in protein, okay? We leave the salad aside for now, and we talk about the protein content of the meatballs, right? So there is a study that is published in the American Journal of Medicine that subjects that had the highest protein in their diet, up to 100 grams per day, had actually 40% lower chances of getting hypertension. So this meal, this protein-rich meal, actually helps in controlling hypertension in this way. And of course, protein makes you feel full, you see. It makes you feel satisfied, and you will consume less throughout the day. So that encourages weight loss. See, there are a lot of plus points of this recipe. Another one is that it also helps controls your blood sugar level. When you lose those blood sugar spikes and crashes, you won't have any impulsive eating. You won't feel like chugging down sweets and chocolates. You won't have shivers. So that's the plus point. That's how this recipe helps in controlling hypertension. That's a very good question, and I hope I did answer that. So, moving on to the next question.
The second question is, what is the other substitute for breadcrumbs?
Okay, substitutes for breadcrumbs. You can substitute them with oats, but you don't really need a substitute, to be honest. All of us can easily get bread. If you can't get breadcrumbs, use some stale bread, throw it in a food processor, and blend it. Then you will have breadcrumbs. Or if you want, you can slightly toast it to make it a little bit more dry. But anyways, you will be soaking these breadcrumbs, so it doesn't matter. In our opinion, you don't need a substitute. It's easy to get and easy to make. I hope that answers your question. Moving on.
Thank you, Chan. The next question is, why we need to use breadcrumb in the meatballs?
Oh yeah, okay. Now, breadcrumbs acts as a binder. You see, when you bake meat or fry any meat without breadcrumbs, the protein will shrink and it will lose its juices. It will be less tasty, and you will end up with a really tough meatball. So why you add breadcrumbs is because it acts as a binder. It binds the meat together, and the breadcrumbs are soaked. So it releases moisture. It flavors the meat as well, but at the same time, it provides the juices for the meat and holds them together, prevents them from shrinking too much, so it's not too tough and it's still very juicy. So that's why you're using breadcrumbs. Moving on, next question, please.
Can I use air fryer instead of oven?
Oh yeah, definitely. You can always fry your meatballs, but in an air fryer, not in oil. You can use an air fryer to replace an oven to fry the meatballs. It will cook faster, but you might have a gradient, as in the outer part of the meatballs will be very slightly overcooked, and the center will be just right. Because you do not want any pink meatballs. I hope that answers your question. Next question, please.
I saw you are using low sodium soy sauce in the video. So what is the benefits of using low sodium soy sauce?
Okay, the influence of salt on hypertension is very great, Like, as you increase the amount of salt, which is table salt what we usually consume, that increases the amount of sodium in our bloodstream. And what this does that it hinders the ability of the kidney to remove water, H2O. And this will cause the blood pressure to rise, having extra fluid in the body. And this will have a strain on the blood vessels. So this is quite a cycle. This strain on these blood vessels will cause the artery to grow and become stronger and thicker. So the lumen will be smaller, and this will further rise the blood pressure. So this is basically like a cycle, and that's why we were using a low sodium soy sauce. We do not want that much sodium in our body. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Chan. The next question is why we need to soak breadcrumbs in the mixture of low-fat milk and low-fat yogurt.
Okay, as mentioned earlier, we soak the breadcrumbs so that it can provide moisture to the meat, so the proteins won't shrink and it won't lose too much moisture, and the meatballs will be juicy. So the reason we're soaking it in milk and yogurt is because we want to flavor the meatballs as well. Yogurt provides a slight tangy flavor to it, but the acidity will evaporate as you're baking meatballs. So this gives it a really savory, like umami-like flavor. So that's why there's yogurt in this. Usually you'll see breadcrumbs soaked in water or just milk in other recipes. But for us, we added a little bit of yogurt for, of course, protein and the flavor. I hope that answers your question. Moving on.
Okay. Next question is there any tips in forming the meatballs?
Oh, a lot. First, wet your hands. Make sure your hands are wet. Meatballs have a tendency to stick, so if your hands are wet, it will just slide across, and it's easier to form a meatball of a regular shape. And you don't have to form it like you're rolling a dough. That wouldn't work for this recipe. You have to understand, in this recipe, the meat mixture is quite wet, so it's really hard to form a ball. I would recommend that you leave it in the fridge for an hour or an hour and a half, covered, then shake it. So the paste would be tougher and it's easier to form a ball. But don't be too focused on the shape, because as you bake it, they will flatten. Okay, so it doesn't really matter much. Just make sure that it's not too compact. Don't throw it on your hands many times, because that removes a lot of air bubbles. And these air pockets are the spaces that traps the juices of the meatballs. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Chan. Next question. How do you know if a meatball is cooked?
Generally, if you follow the recipe, the meatballs will be cooked, provided the meatballs are of a golf ball size. If you shape it into a tennis ball size, definitely it will be undercooked. But the best way to know if it's overcooked is, of course, to get a meat thermometer, because you won't know if it's cooked until you open it up. But with a meat thermometer, it goes straight into the center of the meatball, and you can record the temperature. And depending on your meat, generally, if the temperature exceeds 75 degrees Celsius, it is safe to eat, and it is considered cooked.
I get it.
So, next question,
Next
please.
question. Does meat lose its protein when cooked at high temperature?
Well, cooking won't lose the proteins, but the proteins will be denatured. It's not lost. it's just denatured. But of course, the juices that flow out, if you consider that protein loss, yes, it is loss. I hope that answers your question. Moving on to the next one, please.
Next question. What if meatballs that are formed are not evenly in size?
Well, then I would recommend that you get a weighing scale and weigh your meatballs, every one of them. Make the first one, weigh it, and make sure the consecutive meatballs are of similar weight. And in that case, it will be of equal size, because unequally sized meatballs are quite dangerous. If you don't cook it enough, some will be undercooked. That is the most dangerous situation. And the other situation will be a really not so tasty situation where the meatballs, some of the meatballs are too small and they are overcooked. I hope that answers your question. Next question, please. Is it okay if the meatballs are a little pink inside? Generally, when the meatballs are pink inside, it is not safe to eat. You have to understand something, that the meat grinding process introduces a lot of bacteria into the meat. So if it's still pink, we will consider that not safe to eat. And as I said earlier, the best is to get a meat thermometer. If it exceeds 75 degrees Celsius, it will be safe to eat. I hope that answers your question.
Next question. Is the duration of putting the meatballs in the oven is fixed?
It is not fixed, to be honest. It really depends on the size of the meatballs. If it's golf ball sized, generally 17 minutes will do. And if it's larger, well, more time will be required. This is really hard to tell. There's no proportion. You have to experiment different sizes and time and temperature. It's quite a complex thing, but experimenting with it would be a good way to go if you wish to know about different temperatures and times to cook meatballs of different sizes. I hope that answers your question.
Can I use Thousand Island sauce rather than soy sauce?
I will not suggest using Thousand Island sauce unless you can find Thousand Island sauce that is low in salt, like salt-free, sugar-free, and fat-free, which makes the Thousand Island sauce not tasty anymore, to be honest. But Thousand Island sauce is a sauce that is so sweet, that is known for its savory, sweet and savory, and slight tangy flavor. And these comes from the sugars, the MSG, salt, and all the other fats, As they say in culinary, fat is flavor. You lose fat, you lose flavor, unless you use spices in them. So that's why I would recommend that you go for low sodium soy sauce. The good thing about soy sauce, using soy sauce here, is that it increases the umami flavor. So I hope that answers your question.
Next question. Can I use Greek yogurt or sour cream for this recipe?
I would recommend going for Greek yogurt instead of sour cream. Greek yogurt is really concentrated, and the flavor itself is also concentrated. And another thing is that nutrients are concentrated as well. If you take a look at how Greek yogurt are made, they are not made like simple yogurt. They are basically strained yogurt, so they are concentrated. Adding equal amount of Greek yogurt as of yogurt, you will have more nutrients in the Greek yogurt and more flavor as well.
Yeah.
So use Greek yogurt. I would recommend that.
Thank you, Chan. Next question. Can I make the meatball today and store it in the refrigerator so that I can bake it for the other day?
Yes, you can. You can first make it and lay it on a piece of parchment paper and freeze it first. Then store it in the refrigerator safe bag in the freezer compartment. Freezing the meatballs allows you to store it for up to 2 months. But do remember to defrost your meatballs in the refrigerator before you bake them. Next question, please.
Next question. How long will be the time taken for me to mix the breadcrumb with the meat? And how should I know when I can stop mixing?
Okay, there's no fixed time really. If you mix it really slow, like this, then it's gonna take you hours.
Yeah.
If you mix it really fast, maybe like 5 minutes. So the best thing is to, have a visual cue. When it looks like a paste, like a pink paste, and that's when you know your meatballs are done. I mean, don't be afraid to overwork your meat, as we said in the video, because it's quite impossible. You're not going to work your meat for hours, like non-stop, okay? So basically when the meat looks pink, like a pink paste, that's when the mixture is done. Next questions, please. Any other questions?
I think no questions already.
Okay, then that marks the end of our live Q&A session. Now, in just 2 hours, we'll be joined by fitness professional Ms. Yasmin Lee, who will give us a talk and demonstration on how exercise can help to ward off hypertension. Once again, we'd like to remind everyone to join our fitness hashtag challenge and do subscribe and follow our page on Facebook and Instagram with the username of PHC2020QIU. I repeat, it's PHC2020QIU. See you guys at 4 p.m.